Like the Italian Faenza Codex, the German Buxheim Organbook contains liturgical music to be played by the organist during the church service. Also, like Faenza, the Buxheim arrangements are meant to be used in alternation with a cantor or choir singing the plain song. Also, like Faenza, we have settings for the Kyrie of the Mass. Faenza also includes settings for Gloria, but we don't have that in the German Buxheim manuscript. The Kyrie eleison de Santa Maria Vergine is a setting of the Mass for the Virgin, cum jubilo, which in the modern Liber Usualis is Mass 9. In the first setting, there are indications for the use of pedal for the lowest voice. And this is shown with the letter P next to the tablature letters for the notes to be played. Sometimes the pedal is adding a fourth voice to the predominantly three-voice texture. Sometimes it's doubling the three-part texture. And it always is providing an amplification, a filling out of the tessitura that makes this a rather dramatic opening statement of the Kyrie. For that reason, I like to use a full Blockwerk sound, 16/8/4/2 mixture, imitating what would have been possible on the largest late medieval organs, such as that at Halberstadt Cathedral, described by Pretorius, writing centuries later in 1619. And again, I'll be using a pedal coupler to the grate in order to get a mixture in the pedal. Since the Fritts organ here does not have a mixture, we know that the Halberstadt pedal board controlled mixture pipes. So I think it's a nice bit of information to be adapted in a modern performance. Here is the first Kyrie from the Buxheim Organbook. In the manuscript, we have the Latin finis, meaning end. And then we have a setting of the Christe. Now, it's important to have two organ settings of the Kyrie, since the organ starts setting the pitch, and then the choir sings the second one, and then the organ would play the third. And in the absence of another setting before the Christe, I think it's possible to repeat the first setting. A similar thing happens with the fourth and sixth settings of the organ Kyrie, where you only have one. The plain song for the sixth or final Kyrie has an extra tail, if you will, or added on bit at the end, and that is present in the one setting for the final Kyrie. So I believe that organists would just stop that at the point before the extra bit for the fourth Kyrie, and then play the entire setting for the final Kyrie. This, of course, is speculative. Some might argue, well, perhaps these are just models for improvisation, so you're meant to improvise the missing verses. Of course, all of this music was primarily improvised. The presence of a notated repertoire in the mid-15th century for the organ is rather unusual. So I'm not sure that that makes a lot of sense for explaining how to make up for the missing Kyrie movements. And if we go a bit later in time to the 16th century mass settings of Girolamo Cavazzoni in Italy, he even writes for the first Kyrie that it should be repeated. So rather than providing separate settings for Kyries 1 and 3, played by the organ, he instructs the reader to repeat the first one. And I think this probably was a common practice, not always notated, because it would be understood by people of the time that this would be the procedure. It's always much more difficult when you're coming at this music centuries later to know what the prevailing practice was. And this is what we're, of course, trying to do in an attempt to bring it to life again in the 21st century.